They shifted it to another corner of the dime. Now in a power corner, when one group dominates another group. Well, how in the world do these folks become racist? You get all the downs, all the revolutionaries, all white males. They just have imitated the oppressor. They got a bunch of downs all growing up and they act just like the upstarted place. I was in New Zealand organizing whites to fight racism. That was a treat. I went to South Africa and all the anti-racists met in the phone booth. The white anti-racists. But anyways, I was in South Africa and we were followed around. We were in a city a week. And I was there for a month with a team. And we were moving around from Auckland to Wellington and so on. And we'd get there for a week, and we'd work with the Maoris, and we'd work with the Papias, they were called, were the whites, and that means stranger. Been there for 300 years, and Maoris still call them strangers, which I thought was a real message to the whites. Well, anyway, we were followed around by a group of Marxists. And I was doing color-conscious organizing, right? What it meant to be white and all of that sort of stuff. And here these Marxists, they were all white males, and they were very glum. Marxists don't smile. Heavy burdens of the world on the poor old Marxists. So they're sitting there, and we're working along, and then one of them would stand up. You just guarantee that I would be talking, and one of them would stand up and say the following, addressing the Maoris. Brothers and sisters, you know that racism is caused by capitalism. And that we can't get rid of racism until we get rid of capitalism. And we know that we're in common struggle to overthrow capitalist oppression, and when capitalism goes, racism goes. Thank you very much, brothers and sisters. Something to that. A little more passion, but that's the answer. Then a Maori would stand up and say, you are not my brother or my sister. We're the Maoris amongst the Marxists. By the time you overthrow capitalism, our culture will be wiped out, and you don't care about our culture, the hell will you? Or to that effect. I mean, it's something sort of rounded off like that. Now, what we had was the problem of the Downs, who were the revolutionaries, acting like the ups that they were fighting against. And Paulo Freire, who has done work with peasants in Brazil, said the real worry, if you go after power, is that the Downs will imitate the ups unless there's a cultural revolution. Because you're only doing is rearranging the chairs in the Titanic. Somebody new goes in and acts like the last person they replaced. Why? Because the ups are the best teachers in town. That's the only model around about how to do things. What alternatives do you have? Okay, so, but what is racism? Oppression. What's the solution? Shared power, coalitions, multiracial groups trying to deal with the question of power. One more. So now we're at the power corner, and you can see which way I'm moving. Kind of moving it up the line here. This group says the issue isn't power. The issue isn't structure. The issue isn't resources. The fundamental issue that we face in the world today is a crisis of meaning. We don't even know what we're about. If we don't know what we're about and we don't know where we're going, any plan will get us there. And what we need to do is fundamentally think about meaning and significance and who we are as people and identity, and that's the task before us. So what is racism? Ethnocentrism. Not taking seriously alternative meaning systems, assuming that our own system is the only system that's true. Acupuncture, what a crazy idea, sticking needles in folks. Ethnocentrism. One view is dominant, that defines medicine. Crazy Asians running around with needles. That's what it is. I can't produce anything that hasn't been part of Western scientific tradition. Now that you're going to get something, maybe something's going on there. How is that possible? I always got to kick out. The businesses in the United States worry why the Japanese are beating us in so many ways. I have a simple answer: racial supremacy. That doesn't go over too well in the business community. I would say, why was superior to us racist? Well, that can't be. Because we are. How could that be? I have another group racially supreme. So I always like to do that to mess with them. I mean, that's the one thing that gets absolutely ruled out. That can't be. That violates everything. I suppose they were. Oh, we're going to lose. If the question is meaning, then racism is ethnocentrism. How does this group kind of express racism? Well, they get all preoccupied with whiteness, and then fail to see that whiteness is connected with all other kinds of oppression, and then get preoccupied with their own whiteness and don't want to deal with anybody else because they're not ready yet. Hi, I'm in my whiteness stage now. I'm busy working on my whiteness. Black person said, would you like to form a coalition to deal with that? I'm sorry, I'm into my whiteness now. And when I get my identity worked through, we might join together, but I'm not ready yet. Right, and what happens as you move along here, from these different schools, the racism gets more subtle, more sophisticated, and harder to deal with because we become more clever with our language. Now, what does all this have to say about progress? How do we judge if we're making headway in the United States on dealing with the question of racism? Because a lot of people say, hey, things are getting better, things are getting worse, things are standing still. I mean, we have all these different points of view. Well, wrong design. Here we go. Let's take mission, structure, resources, and power and say, okay, what makes the world work? What makes what happen in the real world? Here we get direction from the top down over here, limitation and possibility from the bottom up over here. In the real world that you deal with every day, what runs what? What order would you put the 4 dimensions of the diamond in to figure out what runs what? Anyone? Just run a line down through there. Okay, at the top? Okay. Power. Okay. Somebody else. Structure. Okay. Somebody else. Real world now, huh? Power. Mission. Okay, that's Karl Marx. Just so we got a live one here. What's that say? Your class position, power, and resources determine the structure in which you operate, which then shapes your worldview. That's basically that one. This is my son's view, too. He says, Dad, if you're in power, you can make up the mission on the run. Okay. Let me give you the administrator's delight. This is the way administrators would love the world to be. We all know where we're going. We all fit snugly into our roles. We all have adequate resources. And we don't talk about power because I've got it. Okay. Here's the way I think it works. Now, why is that? Because let's suppose I want to get into power. My desire to get into power is my mission directs power. Let's suppose I'm in power and I want to stay in power. My desire to stay in power is my mission directs power. Power is energy. It always has to be directed by something. So if you're in a power struggle, you're really in a mission struggle. People don't get divorced over power struggles. They get divorced over mission struggles. Mission is over power, but power is over structure. How is that possible? What's the speed limit? Okay, I bet there's not a single person in this room who drives 55. I bet you drive at an average of 62. How many is that true? Something like that. 62, 63, or higher. Do we have any 55ers? Is there? We don't have. Well, a bunch of criminals in the room here. There's not. You're what I call law hoverers. You hover around the law. That's because, why don't you drive 55? It's the law. You want to get there faster. You don't like the law. Whatever it is, a whole bunch of reasons. Clearly not connected with being law-abiding citizens. Does structure make a difference? Damn right. Remember when it was 70? You probably don't. A bunch of teeny boppers in the room here. Remember when it was 70? Drove about 75, 80? Did it make a difference? Yes. Did it make us law-abiding? No. It dropped the whole thing. So structure does make a difference, but because power is over structure, how many of you have ever sent a memo to a subordinate and they don't do anything with it? And you go to them and you talk to them and you say, didn't you get that memo? And they say, memo, memo, memo. And then blame the mail service. You're a damn right you got it, you just didn't like it. And you didn't buy it, and you're not going to act on it. The top can start a lot of things, but the top can't finish anything of an organization. And the middle can't start much, but you can stop anything. You can. Okay. Now, Powers over structure, then structure tells us how we're going to allocate and generate the resources. If I have $1 million, I can do more than if I have $100. If I have good ideas, I can do more if I got bad ideas. So it works up as well. Okay, now, whatever you think the problem is when you analyze your organization, whatever you think it is, if it's a resource problem, a structure problem, a power problem, or a mission problem, whatever you think it is, it's really the next level up. You just experienced a 100% increase in wisdom if you follow that insight. And we tend to solve it the next level down. Ooh. Whatever you think the problem is, it's really the next level up, and we tend to solve it the next level down. Organizations try to solve all their major problems by restructuring things. It's time to reorganize again. Every other year, whether you need it or not, it's time to reorganize. And when we're tired of reorganizing, it's time to rewrite job descriptions. That's fun. The most serious problems in organizations are mission and power. We don't know where we're going, and we don't have the commitment to get there even if we did. So, what I find in terms of the issue of racism, how have we tried to solve the problem of racism? By throwing rules and resources at problems rather than the strenuous and difficult debate of what the hell we're trying to accomplish. And seeing if we can maximize the will to make it happen. So we debate the difference between affirmative action and non-discrimination. We're having a structural debate. You can't answer that question unless we're clear where we're going. And we get absolutely preoccupied. Should we have affirmative action? Should we have non-discrimination? Well, it reminds me of playing Monopoly. Playing Monopoly, let's change the game a little bit. 5 of the pieces that move around can buy Boardwalk, Park Place, green, and yellow. The other ones can buy Baltic. This group over here could buy all the utilities and the railroad and have 10 get out of jail free. This group can't. And so they're playing along, and pretty soon the folks that can do it over here have built hotels, and these poor folks over here, well, they hit that road down through there and get creamed every time. So they begin to protest. And they say, this isn't fair! This isn't fair! We're being had by a rigged system! And the other group says, that's right. That's true. That's unfair. What we need to do is make sure we have one set of rules. Equal play opportunity. EPO. One set of rules. From now on, anybody can buy anything. No advantage to anyone. Keep playing. That's Reagan's policy. You're poor? Build a GM. What's wrong with you? You gotta go home? No gumption? Get on with it. You don't like the federal park system? Buy a private park. Come on, bring in a prize. Okay, what? We can't answer the fundamental questions, it seems to me, about racism unless we work here. Now, what does that say about the kinds of racism we have to deal with? I think the basic kinds of racism that we've been dealing with is institutional racism, structure, inclusion into the system, and personal racism, bigotry, prejudice, all that sort of stuff. I'm suggesting there are 2 other kinds that we have to address. Cultural racism, mission, meaning, and political racism, oppression. And if we don't deal with those 2, the institutions won't work, and we're going to be in the same mess that we're in now 20 years from now. Now, what's that? What are the implications of that for leadership? Leadership, as distinct from the rest of us, ordinary folks, is that leadership moves us this way, whereas this is the natural direction of things. So, what should a university be struggling with? Leadership in the area of truth-seeking about the nature of the phenomenon that we're dealing with. Should be moving us this direction. What do they tend to do? Either ignore it, hope it goes away, or includes it occasionally in a little course off on the side. How can we teach history without including racism as one of the fundamental organizing themes of looking at the United States? And which way do we teach history? From east to west, west to east, north to south? Which way do we teach American history? East to west, that's the way the whites went. What would it be like to teach it the way the Indians went? From the tribes out. Be an interesting way to do it. Suppose we taught it the way Hispanics went, from the south to the north. Be an interesting way to do it. How do we do it? The way the whites went. Manifest destiny. Hell, we rehearse it in every history course. And we call that truth. Well, those are serious problems. And we do it. It's not like evil folks are running around. It's ethnocentrism. It's the way we've always done it. And the other thing that I find is a lot of whites, those of us who are white, aren't against anybody. We're just for ourselves. And that's what we call the club. What's the club? The white male club isn't against anybody else. It says you all can join it if you want to. You act right. Dress up and come on in and be good. But don't get uppity, because then we'll have an attitude problem. But we're not against anybody. We're just for ourselves, and the club members take care of their own members. That's different from what I call the brotherhood, which doesn't want anybody else to join except the brotherhood. But the club says, you all come if you're okay. Highly qualified. Okay, well, I think the task before us then is to try to figure out how to first understand this phenomenon and keep it up front. Because to avoid the issue of faddishness, we're not making a hell of a lot of progress. And we're making some little headways here and there. I think it's a very interesting fact that 25% of the major committees in the House are run now headed by blacks, who represent 5% of the House and 12% of the U.S. population. And what's been the deliverer of that? Seniority. Very interesting. Same way the Southerners got in and stayed in. Very interesting phenomenon going on in the House of Representatives. So I think we make little bits of headway, but for example, black teenage unemployment has been twice that of whites for 35 years. No change. So we have some very intractable issues, and I'm suggesting it's because, in part, it's not that we don't know exactly how to deal with it. I don't believe people when they say they don't know how to deal with it. I think it's because we don't know exactly what we want to do. We're real clever at figuring out how to do things if we want to do it. We're real good at that. So I figure if we don't do it, it's because we don't know, we're not clear what we want to do, not we can't figure out how to do it. We're real clear about it. We're wonderful problem solvers in the United States. So it's a mission power problem, and we'd come up with some wonderful ideas about how to do it if we decided to do it. It means maximizing resources and doing all kinds of things. So I think that we have a mighty task before us, and I think you to be congratulated for participating and continue to look at the issue in 1985. I think it reflects on the country that nobody else is doing it, and it reflects very well on you that you're still willing to deal with this issue. Thank you very much.
Let me do two things. First of all, thank you, Dr. Perry. I'm going to pass out this evaluation. We'd like you to fill out and return it to us before you leave. Leave it at the door. We also might have time if there are a couple questions.
Does this make sense to you? Looking at this way in these different glasses and so on?
Any questions for Dr. Perry?
Yes. Do I think the problem... I'll repeat the question. Do I think the problem of racism will ever be solved? Well, I don't know. It's going to be a long time, but people have asked me, why do I hang in there? I mean, as a white, why hang in there? All the options are worse. All the alternatives are worse. I have a 14-year-old son. I don't want him to have to deal with the kind of craziness, kind of a world that I've had to deal with. So I don't know. I think we can make headway on it. Whether it'll ever go away, I don't know, but I certainly think we can dent it. I think we've made some headway in certain areas. Whether we finally ever totally eliminate it, I don't know. If it's not one crazy up-down relationship, it might be another one. But I think we need to keep battling away at it.
I haven't also certainly understand the sense for a meeting, we have to change the meaning. But what way do we change the meaning? Okay, we have to change, but what?
Oh, okay. In terms of the meaning question, for those of us who are white, it would be very self-consciously figuring out our whiteness and how, and the question, we didn't get into this, I'm glad you raised this question. The unasked question in the United States about racism is how do ups, or whites, lose from racism? Those of us who are white, how do we lose from racism? Well, the up-down exercise gives us one clue, it makes us stupid. And that's not trivial because it got us into Vietnam. I mean, watching the Kennedy thing and see how we got in there and how people were rationalizing that activity. So I think what we have to do is not be afraid of the color issue, not be afraid to deal with it up front, get out of this color blindness kind of myth, and develop a new white consciousness that is, in which, as whites, let me just speak for the whites, we're real clear what we're for, not just what we're against. And I suggest the main thing to be for, four things: pluralism, shared power, supportive structures and institutional laws that move us toward pluralism and shared power, and an equitable distribution of resources. And wherever we find those four things violated, we have a serious problem. And in the United States, we violate all four of those. We're not a pluralistic nation. We're struggling in that direction. We don't share power very well. We're struggling in that direction. We have laws that are conflicting. We don't move too ahead. And we don't have a real equitable distribution of resources. And some indicators it's getting worse. So I think to be a new white is to be real clear what we're for. And that's part of the cultural transformation. It's a cultural transformation because it's fundamentally rooted in a new ethical vision of a society. I think that's the cultural task. Yeah.
In general, what's your evaluation of affirmative action?
Affirmative action, I think, is absolutely essential, even though powers over structure, people move around it, but without it, we don't have enough, sometimes the kind of leverage that we need, although we shouldn't kid ourselves to think it by itself solves the problem, but it gives us another lever on a system. I've worked with a lot of organizations who drift. And it's a little harder to drift when you have affirmative action than when you don't, but if they want to drift, they drift. I think the problem with affirmative action is that it's an interim strategy and that the long-term goal needs to be its elimination. But I think as a step toward correcting the monopoly game, it's essential because you can't correct the monopoly game by just saying, keep playing. You've got to go back and make some special efforts. The problem is when we make the special efforts, we get all these crazy rules, people get preoccupied with the structure, they forget the mission, and they go legalistic. And it's the games that really drive affirmative action crazy.
Maybe I misinterpreted it, but during your speech or your lecture, whatever,
Whatever this was.
it seemed like you were saying that a problem, or a way to solve a problem is to have the people in authority be taught to increase the awareness of those beneath them to overthrow them. And to me, like, how are you going to, like, say, take the Reagan administration. You're not going to get Reagan to inform people to overthrow him, or you're not going to get the school administration teach the students to overthrow, And okay, so now put it in our perspective. I'm like white or whatever, you say make them more aware, which I see is true. But realistically, how are you going to teach whites to make people?
Well, first thing I think we have to do is, as whites, do we lose anything from racism? Why it's in our self-interest to fight racism? Why should we do it? Why don't we just say the hell with it? Blacks lose, Hispanics lose, but what do whites don't lose? It'll just perpetuate itself. So I think a major task is to figure out how we lose. I'm suggesting one way that we lose is that we lose track of who we are, what's going on in the world, and we make crazy judgments which affects our children, other people, and the United States, and the world. And it can lead us into nuclear disaster. I mean, it's a pretty high stake. The problem comes, a lot of whites who are dumb ups don't even see that as a problem. So leadership takes on as part of its task enhancing that dialogue and that discussion. It is an uphill battle. The other thing is, small groups can change big groups. That can be done. Students changed the name of your field, right? The ups weren't in favor of that, right? Who made that happen? The downs. The powers of the weak can change things. Now that you may not say that's a big horrendous thing. However, it is important. We don't always win. But the question is, if we're driven... Well, let me tell you just a quick story. When I first got into the racism business, I was challenged on what it meant to be white. And I wrote a book and worked on it and so on. It wasn't until 2 years later where my heart and my head and my gut all got lined up together, because I was in a seminar that the blacks took over. It was a racism seminar in which I stood up and said, I think the whites ought to think about black leadership. Well, I was called every name in the book. Racist and son of a bitch. Oh, my God. I lived through the weekend. I went home, and my back went out, and I went to bed for 2 weeks. I could not literally get up. Talk about being a down. I couldn't get up. And I could only get up when I finally came to terms with why I was dealing with racism. And what came to me was, the reason I'm fighting racism is not to help blacks, it's not to help Hispanics, it's because it's important for me and people that I love and care about. And when I got clear about that, I stood up. It was like a miracle. Just stood up, whereas before I couldn't. And so what that says to me is, if we can't, as whites, as ups, can't come to terms with why we're doing it, we won't do it, and we won't be there when the going gets tough. And so I think that's the task, and that's the leadership task. And those of you who are student leaders and others, I mean, that's part of our task. And people are going to think we're foolish and crazy and so on, but that's our task. Because all of the options, I think, are worse.
Give a specific example of why racism is bad for whites.
I just did. Makes us stupid.
Well, how is it trying to explain to us for racism not to become racist, or to, instead of being racist, become normal? What do you have to do that?
How do I do which? How do I...
How do you convince them? Speak with them. What are you going to tell them?
Well, I just did it with you.
You haven't convinced me yet.
Oh,
I'm
well.
not a racist.
Well, of course not. Just to dumb up. Well, I think what you do is you look for contradictions. For example, if somebody's a free marketer, take them on their own terms. Say, if you really believe in individual freedom and all that, then practice what you preach. That's one of the most powerful tools that we have. I remember being out at the, it was in Denver at the wildlife, Department of Wildlife, I forgot what it was, Forestry Department, I guess it was. And they had their required affirmative action fix, every year they got to punch their tickets that they went through the training. And so it was a 3-day seminar, and this one guy comes walking in pissed. Damn government makes me be at these things, taking away my rights, rah, 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 rah. And I said, the more I listened to him, he was clearly a free marketer. He didn't want anybody messing with his individual freedom. So I said, you believe in individual freedom, is that right? That's right. And you think that anybody who takes that away from you is oppressing you, is that right? That's right. And you hate monopolies, is that right? That's right. And and then I said, what do you think is the major monopoly in the world? And he said, that's those damn women and minorities. They're taking away my freedom. I used to be able to do whatever I want. And I got all these laws and rules and affirmative action and all that. That's crazy. And I said, what's the real monopoly? He said, I just told you. I said, what's the real monopoly? He said, well, let's look at it historically. I said, how far back do you want to go, Adam? Well, that's not working. I said, what's the real... He said, well, what are you getting at, Bob? And I said, the real monopoly is white males. The ups. Make it more broad.
White male or white male consciousness?
No, it's the club. The white male
It's not
club.
the way they think, it's them as people. Are you making the distinction between there?
I'm saying it's not biologically inherited, but it comes with the territory, and that we can break out of it, but we usually don't. And it's not just white males, it's up categories. And then, remember, I said we're all both. So it's wherever the up is the problem, not just white males. So I want to use that just as a code, or just talk at this point about whites. So I said, it's white males. And he said, damn, that's right. Oh, that's right. He got so excited because what had happened to him is I just helped him be himself. I said, look, if you believe in individual freedom, anything that gets in the way, like arbitrary restriction and so on, get on with your own case. He said, that's right. So I said, John, I think his name was John, I said, John, I want you to help me in the rest of the seminar, because it's going to be a long 3 days. Anytime you hear any bullshit in the room, I want you to call it. Okay. So we're cruising along during the seminar, and this guy says, I'd hire anybody, regardless of race, color, creed, sex, and national origin. And old John says, bullshit! And I said, well, what are you talking about, John? He said, I was just in a meeting with this guy the other day. He said he didn't want any niggers in the place. Silence. There was a traitor in the room. Now, what happened was he began to realize that what racism had done was separate him from what was important to him, and that he had even misunderstood his whole situation by putting onto the victims what was really a problem with the us. And it was so liberating that he became a wonderful ally. He did not become a liberal. He did not become a radical. He did not become a culturalist. He became a damn good anti-racist conservative. It was wonderful. Much easier to deal with him than with the liberals who were always loving me and nailing me in the back. So it's an ongoing process. Another place to get help is from the Downs. I got help today. I'd used the image of, I said, working this thing is like a blind person and the elephant. Everybody has a little hunk of the action, but nobody sees the whole picture. And a woman who was blind said, Bob, that's really offensive. Well, I was a dumb up. Because that's true. That is offensive. I wasn't thinking about that being offensive. I was intending something else. But she said, when you think about it, call it up for review, that's dumb. I said, you're absolutely right. I'll never use that again. It's that way. I'll do it either as an illustration, but I won't use it unreflectively. I'll use it as a teaching point. That's what I mean. I mean, that's dumb up. Now, that skews how you look at life. But all I'm saying, it's a tough case to make on how whites lose. But if we don't have any answer to that, I'd suggest that we'll be here 20 years from now having the same discussion, because whites won't change unless we're forced to, which means revolution. If you don't like revolution, you might try an alternative, which is think about whiteness and the blind spots and dumb upness, and get some help from some other folks who'll talk to us. So talk to some downs, don't just talk to other ups.
Thanks again, Bob. If you have any individual... Be around for a couple minutes if you have an individual